Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, the loser is the winner is the loser, and the influential right-wing media appears for the first time in my lifetime to be in retreat. There's plenty there to commiserate with, plenty there perhaps to celebrate. Depends entirely on where you're sitting. But I'm afraid to tell you, as I'm sure you've worked out for yourself already, that this is the beginning of a process rather than the end of a process. And quite what that process is, only time will tell. If we don't have another election before Christmas, I personally will be very surprised. That doesn't mean I want to see one, not by any stretch of the imagination, but there is so much up for grabs now. There is so much uncertainty. There is a genuine recalibration of the political dial and a genuine redrawing of the political landscape. Astonishing result. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot lately that it's probably time to stop being so combative and divisive and divided. I wonder if that time is now. How many people got Jeremy Corbyn wrong? How many people called that completely incorrectly? How many people bought in perhaps a little bit too easily into the narrative of unelectability? You can talk until you're blue in the face about his past associations with terrorists, but we're already talking about a Conservative government being shored up by 10 seats held by the DUP. The DUP is effectively the umbrella organisation that brought the world the UDA. That's probably where we'll need to go at some point this morning with your help. Just so you know, in contrast to the rest of the British media, this is your platform, this is your forum. There is at the moment no guests booked, no political editors of the Daily Bugle. I'll speak to heavy-hitting politicians about what they think is going to happen next, but other than that, this is your 3 hours, as much if not more than it is mine. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. We'll start, I think, in the way that we would if we were working together this morning, with what's your biggest takeaway? What is the biggest event, the biggest issue, the biggest change, the biggest upshot of last night's result? For me, it's the papers. You know, I'm a little bit obsessed with this because it speaks of just about every aspect of my existence. My whole life has been lived in a journalist's house, and to see people who are part of my profession actively encourage people who are my neighbours and my friends to act against their own interests has been, even for a bloke in middle age, I couldn't quite believe what I've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. This fetishisation of demagogues, the way that we've allowed people like Paul Dacre to malign and insult and debase individuals, human beings, politicians, pop stars in the aftermath of Brexit. This open season on individuals who have the audacity to have arrived at conclusions different from his ludicrously sheltered, cosseted, utterly insulated existence. It shames our nation. And that's why my first reaction today, despite the fact that we're all talking about a loser who's a winner and a winner who's a loser, is that I would pay a fortune to have footage of Paul Dacre's face as that exit poll bounced in last night. It's a little bit petty on my part, and it's perhaps a little bit of an odd departure to go off on first this morning. But if you look at the landscape of British politics, the bile and the hatred and the bitterness that is now commonplace, the utter absence of proper response and proper pause when Joe Cox was murdered, I lay the responsibility for that atmosphere squarely at the feet of one man. And that man is the one who told us that Theresa May was a genius, that Theresa May was the future, that Theresa May was finally an honest politician who we could all trust. And some of us sat at the back of the crowd, didn't we? And just thought, because we're decent people, and just because she's got an endorsement from an indecent man doesn't mean that she's a wrong-un or a bad person. We sat at the back of the crowd and we watched her. We watched her more than we watched Jeremy Corbyn, perhaps. Phone lines are open. Challenge anything. We watched her more than we watched Jeremy Corbyn. And we wondered really whether actually we were almost on drugs. So utterly unable were we to see what they saw. Strong and stable leadership. Where? There are decent people in the Conservative Party. There are decent people in the Conservative cabinet. But to stand up and issue these fatuous phrases, these meaningless sound bites, as if having watched Brexit and Donald Trump happen, clever, educated, intelligent people who should know better thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them. Let's go down the empty soundbite route. Let's go down the lazy sloganeering. Let's talk about getting our country back, and Brexit means Brexit, and fishing. Quite incredible, I think, to see huge swathes of the British population refuse to swallow the Kool-Aid. But Jeremy Corbyn lost. The worst election campaign by a Conservative party, possibly by any party that I can remember seeing in my life, has ended with them getting more seats and more votes than the opposition. So possibly that socialist champagne should be kept on ice for a while longer. I don't know, though, because what they are celebrating, it seems to me, is the dismantling of the... It was a truth, wasn't it? It was out there. I bought into it. Many of you bought into it. That Jeremy Corbyn seemed refreshing, seemed decent, seemed to say stuff that resonated, seemed to represent the embodiment of that feeling that lots of us have at the moment. That surely it doesn't really have to be like this. You can pick anything to describe that status quo. Anything real, of course. You can pick, for me, the strange way in which incomes have gone down across the country, but the richest people in the country have somehow got richer since the financial collapse of 2008. So see a mainstream politician sort of suggesting that that probably isn't somehow inevitable, in my mind, sums up Jeremy Corbyn's appeal. You don't need detail at that point in proceedings, and you don't need sort of incredibly carefully costed pledges. You just need to see someone in the front line of politics say, hang on a minute, does it really have to be like that? No, it doesn't. So if you're baffled, and you're perfectly entitled to be, if you're baffled by the celebratory atmosphere that is abroad among Labour supporters, or many Labour supporters, not all of them, if you're baffled by it, just see it as an assault upon that claim that Jeremy Corbyn was somehow unelectable. And I would suggest it is also true to say that Theresa May's claim to be somehow strong and stable has been undermined just as completely as the claim that Jeremy Corbyn was unelectable. So those are my two takeaways. I never know, when I talk to you of a morning, how much you care about the stuff I care about, because the newspaper side of things, the right-wing media, the first time in my life that I can remember a nationwide ballot confounding and rejecting the instructions of Paul Dacre and Rupert Murdoch seems to me to be a deeply significant moment. But, you know, maybe I'll calm down and see things differently in a few minutes or a few hours' time. That seems to me, because you remember what we did on Wednesday, 13 pages of vitriolic, personal, borderline libelous abuse of a man whose crime was to stand up for the unheeded and unheard. Call him naive, call him idealistic, call him a terrorist sympathiser, call him whatever the hell you want. But people have been drawn to Jeremy Corbyn because they feel that he represents the politics of caring. I'm not here to tell you this morning that he does or that he doesn't. I'm here to tell you what my analysis is of what happened yesterday. And what happened yesterday is that for the first time, perhaps, in a couple of decades, a main party leader seemed to speak for people who just believe that things could be better, and that if a country has bills to pay, they should probably be paid by the richest residents of that country rather than the disabled residents of that country, or the poor residents of that country who have the audacity to have an empty bedroom in their council property, or the nurses with the pay freeze, the police officers who we all get desperately dewy-eyed and sentimental about when they save us from terrorist atrocities, but oddly the wax in our ears expands to fill all available space whenever they turn to us and complain about cuts or ask if perhaps they could be paid a decent wage for risking their lives on our behalf every day. And the rhetoric of bash the bankers when the magic money tree did suddenly create billions and billions of pounds that was used to plug up holes in banks that had led us to the precipice of economic disaster. I'm probably getting a little bit carried away. I am far from a Corbynista, but I'll tell you why I have a strange sense of optimism in my heart this morning. It's simple, it's a little bit cynical, and it's strangely sudden. but I think we might be witnessing the beginning of the end of the chomping, divisive, deceitful, hate-filled media that has typified British journalism and British life for the last 25 years. Maybe we should have seen the signs. Kelvin Mackenzie got sacked last month. Maybe we should have seen the signs that the liars and the hate preachers and the demagogues, and then, of course, you look at the LBC schedule and realise that some of them are still around. But maybe we should have got that inkling, that early inkling, that the younger generation, because make no mistake, the younger generation have delivered this result. The 18 to 24 or the 18 to 35, wherever you want to put it, they've turned up in their droves and they've rejected the things that they were told were inevitable. That's what's given me a bit of a bounce this morning. But I'm under no illusions. The man who lost is perceived as a winner. The woman who won is perceived as a loser. That is not a bedrock or a foundation for stability, certainty or clarity anytime soon. So many questions this morning. Phones are ringing off the hook. Of course they are. I'm not going to ask you simple questions because we're just going to talk to each other today. But Boris Johnson as Prime Minister by Christmas is already being cited in some respectable circles. I'd love to know whether he's lost the country. Nobody seems more associated than him, to me, with that big lie on the side of the bus than Boris Johnson. But he's shrugged off worse in the past. So much to get through. But let's start with the takeaway. Let's just start with the reaction, shall we? So I'd like to know what you think the biggest shock is in terms of beyond the result, the biggest shock that the result delivers, the biggest change, if you will, to your worldview, to your political position. But at the same time, of course, we have to recognise that on a national level, in terms of clarity and security and stability, this is in many ways disastrous. Sorry to rain on your parade, but there it is. What do you think happened? What's changed, if indeed, after the dust settles, anything has? Ben's in Wimbledon. Ben, what would you like to say?
Well, I think I'd just like to say that I think elections are fundamentally going to be different now because we've seen that the left can succeed with a left-wing message, which we haven't seen for quite a few years.
But they lost.
We were all told they were.
But they lost.
We told they were unelectable.
Yes, and they haven't been elected.
35,000. Well,
yeah, say that again, because this is a woman who takes an awful lot of criticism, some of it justified, some of it absolutely disgusting, and the very essence of all the things I was railing against in the last quarter of the programme. The Sun reporter is just managing to hang on to her seat despite it. Just tell us what that majority was again.
Well, she scraped it by 35,000.
35,000 votes.
Yes,
in one constituency, some 75% of everybody who turned out, despite having endured the kind of racist, sexist, misogynistic abuse that no human being in a civilised society should have to endure. But anyway, Ben, you carry on.
Well, what my point was is I think that the Tories have sat down in a room before this election and they've got their slogans and they've got their plans and how they're going to manipulate different demographics, you know, in the north and the south, the young and the old. And it's electioneering, and it's not worked. I mean, this is. I don't want every call to turn into a sort of echo of this one, but they did win. Well, okay. So what I judge winning, but I know John Redwood went on and on the news last hour and spoke about how this was great for the Conservatives and a hard Brexit mandate.
I thought that was a joke on Twitter. Was that real? I saw someone on Twitter said that John Redwood is explaining how this is a brilliant mandate for a hard Brexit. I presumed it was a joke.
Andrew Neil was losing it. Yeah, no, it was real. I mean, what we're saying is that 6 weeks ago we were told it was going to be 100, 150. I mean, we were told it was going to be
three-figure majority. Yeah, absolutely.
We were told that, and anything below that is therefore, I think, a success for Labour, and anything close to what he's done now would have been seen as a, you know, out of the ballpark in 6 weeks ago at the beginning of the election. So when people, you know, when the Daily Telegraph journalists, as I've just seen on Twitter, called for Corbyn to resign if May has to resign because he didn't win either, I think, you know, I don't agree with it. I think you have to look at what the expectations were at the beginning and what's happened now. And
yes,
I think you'll find that
Go on.
I think you'll find the left are buoyed by this. You know, this is they're saying that.
What about the old new left? What about the so-called Blairite wing of the party, who have? Because let's not kid ourselves here, Ben. Some of the vitriol that's been exchanged between the two constituencies contained within ostensibly the same political party has been absolutely disgusting. There's still a lot of questions to be answered with regard to perceived anti-Semitism. There's still a lot of questions to be answered with regard to really violent language and and violent rhetoric being unleashed at each other from members of the same party. So what do you mean when you say the left?
Well, what I found really interesting on election night was talking to the MPs who, it was pointed out by Dimbleby and the other people on BBC, had been very critical of Corbyn. And to a man, to a woman, to a man, to an MP, they gave him so much support and they thanked him. And, you know, when he went to a constituency, that was the constituency that swung it. We saw it in Reading East, we saw it in some others. And they're really putting behind him. And, you know, I think the key for a lot of these Labour people that were critical of Corbyn was he can't win an election. If he goes into an election, which was thought to be 2020, but obviously that didn't happen, he will ruin the Labour Party. Labour Party will be less than 100.
Everyone thought he'll do just well enough to make his own position defensible, but not well enough to give any hope for the next time. And you're pretty categorically stating that hope for the next time, for you at least, has just gone through the roof.
Yeah, I'm really excited for what a hung Parliament can bring, because democratically, what it means is the Tories can't go through with the most extreme parts of their manifesto, which those on the left, including myself, reject to the most. I'm worried by what the DUP have in their manifesto, because that looks...
Well, we'll move on to that, Ben. I sense that you'll be doing a job like this in a few years' time. Such is the breadth and the acuity of your analysis. But I'm duty bound to get some other people involved. 24 minutes after 10 is the time. You know how this works on a day like today. At least you should do by now. No real questions up there. Just a microphone and a switchboard, and an opportunity for us to sort of bounce off each other. Ian is in Romney Marsh. Ian, what's going on?
Yeah, hi, James. You might recall speaking to me about 8 weeks ago when you did a phone-in about there was a general election tomorrow. What would you vote?
I'm not going to lie to you, Ian. Of the 3,000 or 4,000 calls I've taken in that period, at the moment I'm not pulling yours out of the filing cabinet. But crack on anyway.
No, that's fine. I called this. And I'm delighted with the result. I think that
you called a hung Parliament.
Yeah, I said that this would happen.
Okay.
It would be a minority government. I'm happy with it. The young have sat up and taken note, and I'm extremely happy and proud that they did that. To me, it's a rejection of a hard Brexit. It's
why do you say that? Why is it a rejection of a hard Brexit? Because that's going to be a crucial area of debate. And when you see someone like Mary Cray in Wakefield, who not only voted against Article 50, but also did so knowing that her constituency voted 67% to leave, and she romped home, you can't help thinking that Brexit has played some weird role in this election. But why do you think it's the role you describe? It's a vote against hard Brexit.
I don't want to hang around too much on the referendum, but when the result was announced on that, a lot of people were citing the young for not turning out.
Yes.
And if they had done, then we would have had a different result. And I think that's what's happened on this occasion. It's also a rejection of Scottish independence, which, again, I'm extremely happy for.
Or a postponement.
A postponement, a slowing down of momentum.
Yeah, I mean, the Scottish National Party's raison d'etre is Scottish independence, and you know, they've had a bad night, but they're still in the box seat, and I sense from Scotland it's more a case of, look, now's not the time, let's come back to this when everything else is a little bit clearer.
Yeah, but more importantly, it's a message and an opportunity to Parliament, in whatever makeup it is, that when it comes to Brexit, they need to be a bit more all-inclusive with their policies and not just run away on behalf of 52%. I think populism has been found out on both sides.
Are you sure Corbyn's not a beneficiary of populism rather than a critic or an enemy?
He possibly is, but equally...
But it's populism that says, why can't we all be excellent to each other, instead of populism that says your life will get better if you stop being horrible to him and her over there.
Exactly. Let's not be divisive. And I think essentially, Theresa May, we, the public, deserve better than meaningless slogans of Brexit means Brexit. We need more than that.
Yeah, although she's still what? I mean, in strictly democratic terms, mate, that's still a win. It's still the largest party. More seats, more votes for the woman who gave you the Brexit means Brexit soundbite slogan, call it what you will, than for the fella who you think represents the antithesis of it. I'm not in any way raining on your parade. I just think a dose of realism. Completely understand why people who recognise the idiocy of Brexit or who remain completely spooked by America's decision to elect an absolute madman will see today as perhaps some sort of antidote, some sort of break upon the madness. But I'm afraid it's my job to remind you that it's not necessarily anything of the sort. 28 minutes after 10 is the time. A lot of you mentioning Manchester and wondering whether that attack somehow stopped the Tories. The last week, this texter says, was all about security and neither the economy nor Brexit. The Prime Minister couldn't shake off the fact that she cut the police force by 20,000, including backroom intelligence people. And many remember that she told the Police Federation to stop crying wolf. People remember the last thing they are told, James. And they remember the Manchester bomb, then they remember the police cuts, then they remember the crying wolf comment. Would you vote for her? A rhetorical question and a powerful point. People do remember the last thing that they are told. And when you look at the psephology, when you look at the number crunching, the votes that were still up for grabs at the beginning of the campaign were the votes that decided it. In fact, if you had to pick two sides of the same coin that delivered this astonishing result, this profoundly unexpected, almost unprecedented result, it would be the mobilisation of the youth vote. It's still slightly in the realms of anecdote at the moment. The statistical analysis isn't fully in place, but I think everybody senses that young people voted on a scale that we haven't seen for 10 to 20 years. It was under Tony Blair, oddly, that young people stopped voting. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is the people who were genuinely up for grabs at the beginning of the campaign, the people who reject the sort of tribalism that many other people embrace, and they move to Labour in significant numbers. That's why the polling has been so out there, because the people whose minds were open, and that is a criticism of people on the left and the right possessed of minds that were not, people whose minds were open moved. And they moved to Labour. And by 1 o'clock today, we'll have worked out why. They're both making noises about governing. John McDonnell insisting that a Labour minority government would be stable government. Minority government, this will be boring and a bit didactic for a nanosecond, is government. It's not like the coalition that we saw under David Cameron, because that was codified, that was formalised. There was a coalition agreement. There was a platform, a sort of quasi-manifesto, which both Nick Clegg and David Cameron's MPs agreed to pursue. Minority government is very different. It means that you govern effectively from bill to bill, dependent upon your ability to unite both factions within, or all factions within your own party, or as many factions as possible within your own party, and then you're voting allies for that bill. So, yeah, if she signs up 10 DUP members, it gives her a paper majority, but that paper majority can be undermined by half a dozen sort of hardcore Eurosceptics, or half a dozen hardcore evidence-based rational politicians, and then boom, you know, there goes the bill. 10:35 is the time. Is Theo Usherwood with us? Theo Usherwood, the hardest man, that's probably pushing it, hardest working man in the building, not currently in the building, still down at Parliament Green. Are you all right, Theo? Shall I send help?
I'm still here, still alive, still beavering away. To bring you up to speed, James, where we are, the Prime Minister is going to Buckingham Palace at 12:30. She is going to ask the Queen for permission to form a government with the support of the DUP. She will then return to Downing Street, where she will outline the exact details of what is described as an understanding that she has reached with the DUP. This, of course, comes after conversations with senior cabinet ministers and seeing actually Philip Hammond face to face for a meeting. And the consensus that is building in the Conservative Party, or in the upper echelons of the Conservative Party at least, is that for the good of the country, for the national interests, the Tories need to be able to keep on governing with the support of the DUP. You mentioned a minority government. It's more likely that that understanding will be on a bill-to-bill basis rather than a formal coalition, though a coalition hasn't been ruled out yet. And as you say, it's what's known as confidence and supply, the confidence being a Queen's speech where the DUP would support Theresa May in what her legislative programme is, and then in return they would be able to add bits to it or take bits out as it sees fit, and then the supply is the budget. Ditto, the DUP would have to be consulted on any
but they don't wield more power potentially than any other grouping of 10 quotes rebel end quotes Tory MPs, do they, in any legislative process?
And in that respect, I've been on to a senior member of the 1922 committee, which is the sort of ruling body of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, which of course has the power to call a leadership contest if one is required or asked for by around 45 members of the Tory party. And I asked them, how are you going to bring all these elements of the Conservative Party, the Eurosceptic, hardline Eurosceptics, the likes of John Redwood, Anna Soubry on the Remain side, and then the DUP together to do anything at all? And the reply I got was, nobody says it's going to be easy. We are, James, heading for a stalemate because the Tories aren't going to let go of power. They don't want to hold a general election because, as the same member of the 1922 committee put it to me, heaven knows we might lose and end up with a Marxist government. So we're now in this situation where we've got 5 years, as things stand right now, at 20 to 11 on Friday morning. We now have a situation where we're going to have a Conservative government which can do very, very little ahead of the most important negotiations this country has faced since World War II.
11 days, or is it 10 now?
Well, Michel Barnier has been quite generous on that. He said that he can delay the start of Brexit negotiations, but he says he wants to stick to the overall timetable, which of course is 2 years. I should just remind listeners, Michel Barnier is the chief Brexit negotiator.
And it's in his gift. We can ask him to delay it and he can say no, so it's quite generous of him to say straight up.
He's been very kind, yeah.
They always are, unfortunately, but again, we're back to the depiction of these people as a sort of cross between the Third Reich and the Munchkin Army.
There is going to be a price, James, and it's worth...
Before you do that, and this might not be your field of expertise, it certainly isn't mine, but what we're looking at then, if a Conservative DUP alliance, the DUP were actively and actually endorsed by paramilitary organisations in Northern Ireland, and some of the worst loyalist paramilitaries sprang from the soil that the DUP laid. So you are looking potentially at a coalition of a senior English political party with a Northern Irish faction genuinely supported by terrorists. I mean, the irony is almost unbelievable.
Yes, it is.
While Sinn Féin refused to take up their seats, even though they could give 7 to Jeremy Corbyn, which would, of course, boost his position in the House of Commons, but they're not going to do that, and he's the one that's supposed to be the terrorist sympathiser.
Yes, the other thing to look out for, of course, what it means for the Brexit negotiations. Theresa May is going to have to take a softer stance when it comes to that, because, of course, the DUP were fairly Remainy, for want of a better word, and they're worried about the border in Northern Ireland. It is going to be fraught. It is going to be tense. There is an inquest going on at Number 10, and I think there's going to be a heavy price to pay. From the very outset, this was an astonishingly badly run campaign. The first indication...
I'm just hearing Paul Nuttall's resigned. Do you care?
I'm not surprised to hear that. There was a movement within his party. Yes, I'm just looking at the screen now. For him to go on holiday, but he's obviously going on a very long holiday after 7 months in charge, taking over from the party. Question is, will Nigel Farage come back?
And he, to be fair to Mr. Nuttall, he does have 8 FTSE 100 companies to run.
Yes, he does. You do make it sometimes quite difficult, James. I haven't had a huge amount.
You're so exhausted you haven't slept yet. I'm just going to carry on until you start crying.
You're just corpsing me. No, stop. Right, okay, serious point. Serious point. There is going to be a price to pay. Coming back to the point, away from Paul Nuttall, on this, James, is that the fox hunting was the first sign that things were going off the rails. Because why would you mention that? It's such a divisive issue.
Looking back, it was just very, very odd. It was as if you're at a perfectly nice sort of tea party. The vicar's just poured himself a cup of Darjeeling, and somebody sort of sets off a sting bomb in the middle of the room. It was just quite bizarre looking back.
And then you had the NHS cyber attacks, and I had people connected to Linton Crosby who were ringing me up, going, Theo, you want to run this story about inheritance, about Labour's reversal of the inheritance tax and what it's going to cost, what the difficulty is going to be, house price, if you own a house in over £425,000 in London, you're going to have to pay 40% on your inheritance tax, and that affects 2 million houses. And then I got a phone call from the sort of Theresa May side of the campaign saying, no, you don't want to run that. We're not doing that today. What we're going to do is we're going to be talking about a strong and stable government dealing with the cyber attacks to do with the NHS. At the same time, you had Jonathan Ashworth, the Shadow Health Minister, saying that because of underinvestment in the NHS, you had this huge problem with the cyber attacks. And this sort of problem continued. And then you got the manifesto, which was such an absolute disaster on social care. And then I had the same people from Linton Crosby ringing me up going, no, you want to talk about inheritance tax again? I said, well, I'll talk about inheritance tax, sure, but then we need to talk about the dementia tax, because that's only fair because those are your plans. It was a complete mess.
Are you just having some sort of personal psychodrama at the moment, Theo?
No, I'm trying to explain to your listeners, James, how badly this campaign was organised and the level of anger within the Conservative Party that they now got to somehow overcome and put all the egos to one side.
Well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, is it?
Well, that's the
challenge they face. That's the challenge they face.
Otherwise, you've got a Marxist terrorist sympathising Prime Minister in Downing Street in October.
They would say.
They would say, yes.
Yes, well, I mean, perhaps the best way of putting it, Theresa May has failed to get the massive support from the country that she was hoping to get in order to allow her to do whatever it is she wanted to do, which she never got around to telling us.
And so we're now in a situation where Theresa May set out to get a large mandate to deliver Brexit. She didn't get the mandate, but she's going to continue to govern anyway.
For now,
but this speaks to... Sometimes in politics, you can put the number of seats you have, you can put the inner workings of Parliament and the machinations of Conservative Party or Labour Party politics just to one side. It's a question of one simple word: legitimacy. Can Theresa May be a legitimate Prime Minister? And that is what is going to nag at every turn for as long as she remains in number 10.
For the duration. And then just to sort of put a cherry on the icing on the cake, that tweet sent out from her personal account, such as, whatever that means, if Labour wins 6 seats, we will lose this election. So she's already having to row back from that, which you could, if you were, I suppose, a spin doctor, you could portray that as yet more evidence of her utter inability to stick to anything.
Well, she rowed back from calling a general election, saying that she wasn't going to call a general election 3 times, and then called a general election, which apparently now some spin doctors say she never wanted to call in the first place, and it was all David Davis's fault. The whole thing will, at some point, when we've all had some sleep, implode, because, of course, you've got Boris Johnson waiting in the wings.
And we don't know whether he's shot his own fox with the country after being so readily associated with some of the bigger lies of the Brexit campaign, but, of course, he has a reputation for being Teflon as well. Good grief. So, I mean, the fun's just starting, Theo.
It's gonna continue indefinitely. I can't see an end to it.
Do you know what? You can't see an end to it. Don't worry. There'll be an end to it eventually.
I'm hostage in this tent on College Green.
4 blokes not even had breakfast. I can't see an end to it. I've forgotten what my son looks like. I just showed him a picture of Theo's little boy. Got showed a picture. He said, "Who's that, mummy?" Do you know what Amir says on Twitter, Theo?
What?
I love the banter between @Mr James OB and @Theo Usherwood, 2 of the nicest guys on the radio. He's got that half right.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's all down to you, James.
No, rubbish.
You've been good to me. Thank you.
Rubbish. You're Robin. I'm Batman. It's 10:45. Paul Nuttall's decision to resign probably informed in part by the fact that the transfer window is still open. There aren't many 3-time World Cup winners that you can get on a free, so the phones will no doubt be ringing off the hook in not just the Premier League, but also the Spanish and Italian and German leagues as well, no doubt. Or they might come in with a megabucks offer from China. Either way, some suggesting that Farage might crawl back to the leadership of the party. Obviously, in the context of the LBC Summer Barbecue Party, that would be great news, but in the context of the political landscape, possibly less so. Who are you rooting for today? What are you reeling from today? Why are you sad? Why are you happy? What have you taken away from the result that next to nobody predicted, except that bloke I told you about 6 weeks ago who urged me to pile in on a hung parliament? Hasib's in Banbury. Hasib, what's going on?
Hi, good morning, James. What an astonishing election. I was awake pretty much all night, and historically I've been a Tory supporter, but over the last few weeks, probably months as well, actually, I've been leaning towards Labour. And
what have you been? Can I ask you? And this is absolutely at the heart of a lot of votes, and there's not going to be an overall answer to it. Did you lean towards Labour, or did you lean away from the Conservatives?
A bit of both.
Okay.
But I looked at the manifesto. I looked at the manifesto when it came out, and I thought the policies are absolutely bang on. The only question I had was how would Labour fund it. But then Labour came out and they gave they gave their costs on how they would fund those policies. How realistic that was or is, that's not for me to argue. But in terms of the policies, I thought they were bang on. Add to that the fact that Theresa May in this campaign has been absolutely shambolic, to be honest.
Has she? Give me put some flesh on the bones of that adjective. How has she been shambolic?
First off, calling the election when she said she wasn't going to 3 times, U-turn number 1. Then the defamation tax policy in the manifesto, which I thought was horrible, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm only 30 years old. Luckily for me, I don't have anyone who does suffer from dementia.
Yeah, you never know.
But you never know. And these kind of policies, I thought were absolutely horrendous. Doing the U-turn on the Monday morning, where it was just, the media was going absolutely crazy over it. I do have to say, and I think, I'm very careful as to how I phrase this.
Yes.
But I do think that the 2 terrorist attacks that we've had, I fully expected Theresa May to benefit from those.
Yes, I understand why. Conservative
see what I mean?
security. It's like a home fixture for the Conservatives, and I'm also conscious of choosing my words more carefully than that.
Sure. And I think the main question that I had to ask last night, and I was asking all my friends around this as well, could you imagine what the results would have been like if this whole political campaign, the right-wing media was not smearing Jeremy Corbyn, and as well as that, right from the start, if Labour actually were together and didn't smear Corbyn internally as well? Could you imagine what the results would be like today?
Yeah, and then someone on the other side of the fence would say, could you imagine how well Labour could have done with a slightly more centrist leader and a united party behind him and a much slicker media game? But I think there's more weight in what you said than in what I just countered with. I mean, this is what needs to happen next, isn't it? If somehow, because Corbyn was smeared from within the party, but the Parliamentary Labour Party did so because they didn't think he could deliver. They didn't think he could deliver, and they are perfectly entitled to that conclusion, up to and including the point at which they now admit they were wrong. Okay, I didn't think Jeremy Corbyn could deliver.
And the media.
Yes, the media is different because the media is commercially driven, so they will sell their tickets for the ghost train regardless of the fact that the people that they're selling them to are going to end up diminished, hurt and poorer. But the Parliamentary Labour Party, it's very important that this gets tackled early, because the last thing you want to see is the Labour Party now tear itself to shreds because they've had a little sniff of success that nobody was expecting. They didn't like Corbyn because they didn't think he could deliver. The strand of politics that he represents is towards the left of the modern Labour Party, but it wouldn't have been towards the left of the Labour Party in the 1980s or the early 1990s. John Smith's Labour Party could have accommodated Corbynism in a way that Tony Blair's Labour Party couldn't have done. So if they actually now act like grown-ups, if he puts together a shadow cabinet that draws upon all the talent on the Labour benches, rather than being confined through that pessimism to the people who didn't feel it, he only had his fellow optimists on side, the fellow Corbyn fans. If he can somehow now become the leader of the whole Labour Party, then, well, I think everything's up for grabs.
I think the Labour Party need to see this as the beginning of something rather than the end of the election. They need to look at the possibility of another election before Christmas, which I firmly think there will be, given the situation of the hung parliament. Labour now needs to use this time between now and when the next election is to really regroup and really, again, target some more voters as well, because Jeremy Corbyn has actually given us a fantastic campaign. I had doubts before as well. I wasn't sold on Jeremy Corbyn. I'll happily admit that, but I think his campaign has been absolutely on the money. I think he's been sincere, genuine. It's very smart that he's gone to and,
So I still don't know much about him, but I know more than I did. And I think the point at which the media comes in, and you mentioned this earlier, is that during the period of campaigning, we are duty-bound to be balanced. We are duty-bound as an industry, as individual organisations, as a collective institution. We are duty-bound to give equal time to these people according to their party's performance at the last election. And that seems to have delivered huge numbers of votes to Jeremy Corbyn. So giving Jeremy Corbyn an even break has seen him dismantle a 20-point lead in the polls. And when you mention the media, there's a little bit of me that wonders what the hell would happen if they had to be like that all of the time. Given that the newspapers carried on maligning him, coming close to libeling him, insulting him, degrading him, debasing democracy itself by being so ad hominem and so personal, and yes, Paul Dacre, I do mean you. What would happen if Jeremy Corbyn could somehow sustain that even borderline impartiality that other areas of the media like us were duty-bound to show him? Goodness knows. The sky would be the limit, perhaps.
I think Corbyn was fantastic in tapping into that other market as well, affiliating himself with, celebrities, musicians such as Stormzy, Giggs, all these guys, because, I'm 30 years old. I listen to that music, and, it's a very big generalization when people say, oh, it's just an urban market that he's kind of tapped into. He's tapped into a younger market, and that...
Come on.
As well as the policy with, the scrapping the tuition fees, it's a fantastic way to gain the youngsters' votes. And looking at the turnout guesses from the polls, it looks like it's worked, and that's why Corbyn has done as well as he has.
And at this point, of course, it falls to me to remind everybody listening to this programme that although the language employed by callers like Hasib and the analysis indulged in by all of us actually so far this morning has an air, a ring perhaps of exuberance to it, Jeremy Corbyn lost the election, Theresa May won. But I tell you what, that phrase Pyrrhic victory has rarely seemed so relevant, hasn't it? The idea that you actually win a battle. I forget precisely when it was that Pyrrhus secured his infamous success. You win a battle, but your casualty count is so huge that to all intents and purposes you actually lost. That's probably a fair description of how many people are viewing Theresa May this morning. And don't forget, because I think it's very important, I've said to you since Brexit that Northern Ireland to me was the absolute emblem of all the misunderstanding and all the misinformation. I spoke to a Leave campaigner on the seafront in Wells next to the sea in Norfolk, lovely old fella, Panama hat. And I just asked him, I just said, and my wife gets very cross when I do this, she says, it's bad enough that you have to do it at work, don't bring it home with us. I said, could you just explain to me what is going to happen in Northern Ireland if we leave the Euro? Oh, don't worry about that, old boy, everything will be fine. I said, I do worry about that. Blood was spilled in living memory in pursuit of the peace deal that is currently in place. I do worry about that. If Theresa May does some sort of deal with the Democratic Unionist Party, she will be getting into bed with 10 MPs publicly and personally endorsed by the Ulster Defence Association, the Ulster Volunteer Force and the Red Hand Commando. So by all means be comfortable with that. By all means be cool with that. By all means be untroubled by that. But if you're getting into bed with 10 MPs publicly and personally endorsed by the Ulster Defence Association, the Ulster Volunteer Force and the Red Hand Commando, I'm not really sure how much of a twist you're allowed to get your knickers in over the fact that Jeremy Corbyn used to break bread and continues to have relationships with politicians associated with Republican terrorism. You see, that's where we are now. One side do it, it's absolutely disgusting, deplorable and wrong. The other side do it, oh, there's nothing to see here, everybody move along. Much as I am enthused by the confusion that has been thrown up by yesterday's result, we'll be back where we started if we don't start recognising that a set of rules have to be equally applied to both sides. And as soon as the lies start again about Brexit, then there could be all sorts of problems and divisions still to come. As you just heard, the turnout was astonishingly high. It turns out Brenda in Bristol was not the poster girl for this general election, as almost everybody, myself included, presumed she must be. Something rather strange happened over the course of the last 3 weeks, in that the level of engagement went up, and the level of support for Jeremy Corbyn went up, and the level of support for Theresa May went down. It didn't go down far enough to deliver defeat. I don't think anybody realistically expected it to. Certainly, even predictions that it was going to be close were poo-pooed in many quarters and laughed out of town in others. And it is close. It has failed to deliver an overall majority, which leads most obviously, our fellow anoraks, to parallels probably with 1974. But now's not the time for looking back. Now, sounding roughly like a politician, now is the time for looking forward. And as we look forward, what the hell happens next? 0345 6060 973. What the heck happens next? Country still seems to be divided on Brexit lines more than any others. Obviously, just because I take calls every day from people who regret their vote to leave doesn't mean that it would necessarily have any significant impact upon a plebiscite. I just think people feel comfortable admitting it to me because, well, they're not going to get it screamed at and have sort of little bits of spit land on their face like they would if they admitted it to some other people. But the division now seems to be, in terms of democracy, what do you need? What do we need to know? Okay? I was reading yesterday about how the fact that we've now given notice to leave Euratom, the atomic energy overseer for the whole of the European Union, we've given notice to leave that. So we now need to get quite complicated deals and treaties in place in order to bring in the radioactive material that we need to treat cancer. And as I read it, it was written by a very respected academic. You can see it on my Twitter feed. As I read it, I found myself thinking, God, imagine if they'd pulled this out during the campaign. And he provided all the evidence, all the detail, all the statistical truth to make it a matter of fact. But could you imagine, despite it being a fact, what would have happened if during the Brexit campaign somebody had stood up and said this will compromise our ability to treat cancer sufferers? But they would have absolutely had you for breakfast if you'd said that, even though it was true. That seems to me to be emblematic of some pretty big problems that we've still got. Because any fan of democracy now would say, we've got a referendum result, we have progressed with the decision to leave, and now we will come to you as a country and show you the best deal we can get. No deals off the table for as long as the DUP stay in bed with the Tories, because there's no earthly way that you can have a frictionless border with the European Union unless you've got a deal in place. All of this detail is... I mean, I find it strangely fascinating, but it's utterly, utterly absent from most people's understanding of whatever they mean by the word Brexit. No deal is better than a bad deal. Well, no deal would mean a hard border in Northern Ireland, something that the DUP are simply not going to put up with. They're also sort of prone to Remain leanings, that party, despite having some strange views in other areas, like, for example, the Earth is only 4,000 years old, according to one of their MPs. They're the fellas who think that God buried dinosaur bones in order to test our faith, that kind of school of thought. See, it's not all bread and roses. But you can't have a soft, friction-free border in Northern Ireland without a deal with the European Union, because the European Union are the other side of that border. But no one's going to explain that to you. I don't think I've heard anyone mention fish yet, but that's what they'll do. People will stand up and say, these are the reasons why things are not going to go well, boom, 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 and then someone else will stand up and go, fish! And now the question facing Britain is, how many people are going to take the bloke shouting fish seriously? Fish and passports! Cancer treatment, economic collapse, uncontrolled emigration, employee shortfalls, businesses struggling, all of that on one side, all demonstrable, all evidence-based, all factual. Other side, well, it's just a sort of drunk bloke shouting fish. And how much longer are we going to continue listening to the drunk bloke shouting fish on the other side of the debate? Because if there is a good deal to be got, it needs to be got by the people that the civil service are currently struggling to hire. The negotiators who've never actually negotiated a trade deal, who will be sitting down with people who've spent their entire professional lives negotiating trade deals. At the end of that process, democracy demands that you come to the people and say, well, this is the best we're ever going to get. What do you think? You still up for it? And if we're still up for it, we're still up for it. If we're not still up for it, we slam on the brakes and return to where we were. And that shouldn't be controversial, should it? So here are all the facts that were missing when we made our original decision. But when you see people getting spooked about a second referendum, or you hear people getting spooked about a possible shift in public feeling, what you're actually witnessing is people screaming that the public should not be allowed to see the facts. Do not let them see the facts. Do not show them the evidence. Get the bus, quick, get the bus. Do not let them see the facts. Do not let them hear from the experts that the country had enough of. And that's where I've been for the last 6 months, is utterly baffled how people can simultaneously claim to be champions of democracy while demanding that the members of that democracy are not allowed to think anymore, or to change their mind, or to see the evidence. Don't let them see the evidence. Ignore the man behind the curtain. Are we going to carry on ignoring the man behind the curtain? I genuinely don't know. Anyway, where are we? 9 minutes after 11. Poor old Bob's probably fallen asleep. Bob, what's going on in Edinburgh?
Hi, how you doing?
Good, mate.
Yeah, I'm quite excited, actually. I think it's quite a good result. You spent quite a lot of time just there talking about democracy. I think actually, if things play the way they should in any sort of common sense kind of world, then we should end up in a situation where Theresa May is required to get agreement from other parties and the whole political spectrum to actually negotiate the Brexit deal, to decide what the terms are, maybe even start a cross-party negotiating committee, which would seem to actually then benefit everybody.
The national interest represented by the national political parties.
Yes, rather than...
as reflected by the will of the people, resulting in a sovereign parliament being full of MPs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You're mad. You're crazy.
Yeah, there is a danger that she will just try and use the DWP and railroad everyone into doing it her way because she thinks she knows best.
Well, she can't do that. She can't do that with the numbers she's got. She simply can't do that. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 DUP MPs that have to be kept sweet or whether it's 10 chomping Eurosceptics or 10 Anna Soubries. It just can't be done. It can't be done. I mean, the position is almost untenable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she's going to have to actually start respecting everybody else. Yeah, well, ultimately, like I say, I think that's a good result.
I see why. I mean, in terms of stability and uncertainty, it's anything but a good result. The pound has not tanked on quite the level that I thought it might. The FTSE and the AIM tend to go up at times like this because so much of the money invested is foreign money, so it benefits from the uncertainty that sees the pound go down. It's why the markets go up. But it hasn't gone down by as much as I thought it would in the event of a hung parliament. I don't know why. Maybe it will in the course of the day. Remember, as I bid farewell to Bob, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What are you taking away from yesterday's results? Good, bad, or indifferent? Has anything significant changed? All I offered to you at 10 o'clock this morning was tinged far too much by hope than it should be, far too much built upon what I hope has happened than anything I can prove has happened. But it does look as if Paul Dacre's stranglehold upon British democracy has been roundly rejected by British voters, particularly young ones. The world that the Daily Mail editor portrays on a daily basis, it doesn't actually exist, that world. And yet millions of people in this country think not only that it does, but also that it's somehow just around the corner. If only we can keep monstering Muslims and banning immigrants, then everything will be brilliant. It doesn't exist. Do you know what they say about Dacre at the Daily Mail? They say it's remarkable that the soles on his shoes never show any signs of wear and tear because he never walks on anything but carpet. He comes out of his carpeted home and gets into his carpeted chauffeur-driven car and gets driven to his carpeted offices where he walks around telling everybody else what to do and explaining what the real world is like, even though he's never, ever stepped in it. And then he gets back into his carpeted chauffeur-driven car and driven back to his carpeted estate in Scotland or Mews House in Kensington or gated community in Weybridge, whichever of his homes he's currently staying in. To be fair to the fella, it's only the one in Scotland that takes tens of thousands of pounds every year in EU subsidies. And he never ever sees anything that remotely resembles the reality that we inhabit. And if you go to the comment section of the Daily Mail website, and if you read the columnists in the Daily Mail, you will recognise that in huge swathes of the country also believe in the world that he depicts, despite none of them ever having lived in it. So it seems to me that something shifted there. The effort that went in to depicting Corbyn in that way, that vile, vicious way, would never, ever, ever apply to a Conservative. And this is where they can prove me wrong, because they can now go after the DUP's history of association with paramilitary forces in Northern Ireland. They can now go after these 10 Ulster Unionist MPs on a personal and a political level. They can go through the closets of these MPs who believe in things like creationism and the evilness of homosexuality, and they can dig and dig and dig and dig. And if there is an ounce, an iota, the vaguest scintilla of integrity in that office on Derry Street in Kensington, then these DUP MPs are about to get hauled over the coals in a way that you can't even begin to imagine. Because if Jeremy Corbyn is a terrorist sympathiser, what the hell do you call a political party that was endorsed by the Ulster Defence Association, by the, I can't even remember the name, is it the Combat, I'll get it for you, the Red Hand Commando, publicly and politically endorsed by the Red Hand Commando, the Ulster Volunteer Force, the Ulster Defence Association. But, Jeremy Corbyn once had a cup of tea with Jerry Adams. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the sense that everything is changing is probably a little premature. But goodness knows, we've spent enough time in recent years looking back on political events that feel absolutely disastrous to anybody with a functioning intellect, or perhaps more importantly, a properly beating heart. So I will allow you, should you desire, to feel a little bit cheerful for a little bit longer. We're just conducting a political post-mortem, and I suppose we need to hear from people who are very deeply troubled and dismayed by what happened yesterday. Weirdest of the weird situations in which the bloke who won is getting champagne corks popping, or actually the sort of elderflower wine popping all around his bearded fizzog. The bloke who lost, I beg your pardon, is getting treated like the winner, and the woman who actually won, although on a scale so far from even the scantest expectation, is being treated like a loser. There's a reason why Theresa May is going to the palace in an hour's time. It's because she got the most votes and her party won the most seats. And yet the feeling is on both sides, those who support her and those who do not, the feeling is that she somehow lost. How can you win and lose at the same time? Answer, go into politics. Ian is in Leeds. Ian, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah. Yes, Theresa May won, but I think it's a hollow victory. You know the term, when they talk about the TV programme Jumping the Shark?
Yes, the Happy Days episode where Fonz was being pulled by a boat and actually jumped over a shark. Yes.
Yeah, it's often applied to Family Guy and The Simpsons these days.
Yes.
And I suppose you could say in politics, you could look at something like a poll tax moment.
Yes.
And, for Thatcher, it was a poll tax. For John Major, I would say maybe it was back to basics.
I don't know. I think John Major was more a victim of circumstance than his own hubris. But anyway, for Tony Blair, it was Iraq. We can both agree on that, right?
Well, I'm trying to think of something, one particular
pivot
thing that people can latch onto. So, I mean, with Gordon Brown, it was when he called that woman bigoted, and so on. And I think for Theresa May, I think it's her constant flip-flopping, especially when she said several times, I will not be calling a snap election. Did you
really care about that? Because I'm going to speculate a little bit here, and I'm going to say you were never going to vote for her anyway. You're just using that as a sort of oyster knife to open the oyster. You didn't put you off, Ian, did it?
No, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
It didn't put me voting for because I would never would have voted.
Exactly.
But it shows her untrustworthiness, and I think that's the issue. It showed how untrustworthy she was, where she's prepared to do one thing and say one thing and do the complete opposite without having a credible explanation as to why, because her reasons for doing so were extremely weak. And we've seen a situation now where she said, I need a strong mandate. Well, she hasn't got that strong mandate in terms of a large majority. I mean, she's got a mandate, but it's a very slim one, if that.
Yeah, I mean, when is a mandate not a mandate? When it's a May-date?
Well, personally, I think the clock is ticking, because I think that she might, either two things might happen. One, she might be formally challenged. As for when, I don't know, but it might well happen. But if that doesn't happen, then I think her backbenchers might well make a certain amount of mischief. And all it takes, again, we're living in an instant media world, and all it takes is an MP to do what Geoffrey Howe did to Margaret Thatcher, or what Norman Lamont did to John Major, or what Anne Widdecombe did to Michael Howard, and it takes just one pissy remark for people to remember, and they become associated with that remark. And
it just sticks. It just sticks. I wonder if she's given herself that label, oddly. I wonder if strong and stable will be the epithet that does for her, rather than anything hurled at her by her opponents within or without her own party. Strong and stable is, I mean, it's comical now, right?
Well, that hasn't helped, because she's used it so often, and so many of her MPs have used it so often. They sounded like robots. They sound like worse than robots. They sound like cardboard cutouts.
Yes.
It's just just repetitive.
It was quite remarkable, and I mean, it's going to be PhD theses and weighty tomes that examine this properly. But I do look at Brexit and Trump and wonder whether they just decided that you can treat the British public, you can treat the voter like complete chumps. You can just throw them hollow little phrases and then scare them and paint your opponent as being vicious and evil, and that whole lock her up school of thought very much seemed to be how they were treating Jeremy Corbyn, and possibly, and it's far too early to conclude this with certainty, the British voters, there just aren't enough of them that fall into those sort of traps to deliver the result that she was looking for. If she had answered questions more thoroughly, if she had appeared more personable, if she had accounted for the U-turns or even not undertaken them, things could have been very, very different. But I felt as a voter that she was treating me like a prat.
Yes, I mean, I think she was just taking things far too much for granted. She thought that, she would. I mean, it's like the old Volkswagen advert that used to come in the 1980s when there was a gambler leaving a casino.
Yes,
I think it was for Volkswagen, and the narration said he bet on red and it came up black.
Yes.
And that's exactly what she's done. But she hasn't just done it with her own positions, she's done it with the whole country.
And that's what makes me cross, actually. There's a time to perhaps rein in any exuberance or anything like that. And this applies equally across the board. But for the time being, at least, it doesn't seem to me to apply to Jeremy Corbyn's cabal. Ian, thank you so much. These people who treat it all like a game, these people who now are making phone calls and scurrying around in corridors and doing little deals and talking about, well, who's going to challenge her? Is it going to be you, Boris? Or, I mean, I'm very, very sorry for Michael Gove this morning. Who the hell is he going to stab in the back? He'll be struggling to work out where his knife is, let alone who he's going to stick it in. But you've just got all of these people who seem to treat it like a game. This is our children's future. This is our future. It's our economic security and our national security. All of these things are more uncertain than they've been for generations. And these people, particularly, I'm sorry, but particularly the rich ones, seem to think that it's some sort of game, seem to think that it's some sort of exercise in machination and secret communication. And I hate that. I despise that with all of my being. Labour Party people have done it as well. Labour Party people have done it in recent years. Labour Party people may well be doing it now. But they're not in government at the minute. The people who are actually in government seem to have spent certainly pretty much every day since the referendum result working out new ways in which to prove the contempt in which they hold the British public while pretending that they're on the same side. 11:26 is the time. Where are we going next? Edinburgh or Isleworth? Let's go to Edinburgh. Annie is in Edinburgh. Getting so many Scottish callers these days, Annie. It fills my middle-aged heart with joy. What do you want to say to me?
You're pooping my party.
I'm pooping your party?
Yeah, I was having a really good day until I listened to you.
I'm sorry to hear that. Why has your party pooped?
Because I was all excited that Labour had done really well until you pointed out that, no, they still lost.
To be fair, that's just counting.
I know, but it felt really encouraging.
Well, it still could be. There's a difference between feeling encouraged and knowing that you've won. You didn't win, but you're perfectly entitled to feel encouraged. Why are you feeling encouraged? Especially as Scottish Labour played how can we say, quite a complicated role in proceedings.
Actually, that's why I'm phoning, is they played a horrible role in proceedings. So Kezia Dugdale, the head of Scottish Labour, actively encouraged voters in Scotland to vote Conservative because they had more chance of beating SNP than Scottish Labour did. How can she hold her position as head of Scottish Labour doing that?
Well, this is what prompted Nicola Sturgeon to say, if memory serves, that if you like Jeremy Corbyn's politics, you should vote for the SNP.
Because the SNP agrees with more of Jeremy's pledges than Scottish Labour does.
But, of course, that would be a coalition of chaos, whereas getting in bed with the Red Hand Commando-supported DUP would be strong and stable leadership. I mean, I don't mean to rain on your parade, Annie, or even poop your party, but it's the beginning of a process. This, isn't it? Not the end of a process. This is a beginning of a period of great uncertainty, at the end of which you and I both hope things will be better than they were at the beginning. But there aren't any guarantees.
No, there's not. But I am very thankful that you're the only person in the media today that's pointing out that the SNP did still win the election in Scotland.
Indeed they did, but not in the circumstances that Miss Sturgeon would have wanted to, any more than Theresa May.
There was no way we were going to hold our 56 seats. No one in the SNP thought we were going to.
No, but you didn't think you were going to lose...
We were going to lose Angus Roberts.
No, exactly, or Alex Salmond.
Alex Salmond we saw coming.
Really?
But
we'll probably throw him a bone here at LBC. There's a phone-in host in the making, if ever there was one. Alex Salmond. He should be on the roster sometime soon, and then we can carry on hoovering up all you listeners in Scotland. So, are you feeling still cheerful, but possibly you're not going to kind of sell the house just yet?
Oh, I'm young. I can't afford a house.
And there is part of Jeremy Corbyn's appeal in a nutshell. Will he deliver to the voters who consider him to be some sort of force for good without ever, and don't shoot me down for saying this, somebody has to, being a force for good without ever really being able to explain clearly and with detail why you think he'll be a force for good? It's just gone 11:30, which means it is effectively half-time, and I don't know about you, but I feel like we've only just drawn breath. Conversation continues. So file it under this. If you're new to this programme, thank you and welcome, but we do things a little bit differently from everybody else. For example, I'm kind of asking, hey, what's going on? And I'm not booking the political editor of the Daily Bugle and the former MP for Berkshire or whatever it may be. I just want to talk to you, because do you know what? Your vote is worth the same as theirs, and your opinion, in my opinion, is worth arguably more than theirs, because you can move on a sixpence, you've got a mind that's changeable, and as we often say on this programme, there is absolutely no point having a mind if you never change it. An observation probably best evinced by the fact that with regard to Brexit, we now seem to be looking at a scenario in which just about everybody who possesses a qualification to judge the issues or to make predictions is on one side of the debate, and on the other side of the debate you've just got a load of drunkards shouting fish. Rob's in Sutton. Rob, you'll be next. Jamie's in Isleworth. You've been waiting longer. Jamie, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. I'm the first time caller, so a bit nervous.
You're very welcome. Don't be.
I just want to say firstly that I think it's great that we finally got a Sikh MP in Parliament.
A turban-wearing Sikh MP for the first time, isn't it? That's the point.
I just think it's been so long without one. And I mean, you had Boris Johnson calling for and everything, but I mean, it's just
Boris Johnson,
so
the great friend of the Sikhs, who told them in their own temple how easy it would be to buy whiskey after we signed a trade deal with India.
Exactly.
Post-Brexit, despite alcohol being, of course, anathema for devout Sikhs. Anyway, carry on. Good old Boris, he'll be back.
But I'm thinking, I'm a Labour member and I've done work experience for my local MP and everything, and it's just
Who is your local MP? Ruth Cadbury?
Yeah, Ruth Cadbury. Yeah.
She had an astonishing, because that's my constituency as well, and from 400 and something to about 12,000.
Yeah, I mean, and that happened in with Rupert Huss kneeling, and then Stephen Pound as well. These
West London constituencies have delivered some really quite big surprises, and from a Labour Party supporter's point of view, like you, Jamie, some very welcome surprises. What do you think happened when you were on the doorstep? What were you hearing?
Oh, I wasn't doorstepping because of exams and everything. I wasn't in a leaflet though. But
you were in a leaflet?
Yes, I was in a Labour leaflet.
We get all the big names on this programme. Jamie was in a leaflet. What do you think happened then? Just in your corner of the country, why do you think the shift was so unexpected and big?
The night before, I was so pessimistic about what was going to happen because with saying Labour relying on youth turnout and all that stuff, and just I can't put it down to anything. But I can only assume it's I can't decide what it would be in London. But, I mean, obviously Remain sticks out, but when I talk from people I've talked to, Remain doesn't really seem to be on the issue.
No, well, Mary Cray in Wakefield is one of the most interesting results. 67% leave, and she was one of the few Labour MPs who had the cojones to not go along with the Article 50 vote. She sort of stuck up for her beliefs, which is what representative democracy MPs are supposed to do. So no, it didn't. I mean, it was supposed to be the Brexit debate, the Brexit election. It wasn't the Brexit election, but my God, it looks like being the Brexit aftermath, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you've got Vince Cable winning Twickenham again. I mean, that was always going to happen from the moment the election was called, because he's so popular around there. But
I don't know that. I didn't hear that on the ground. That Vince was a shoo-in. Zach Goldsmith, of course, got back in Richmond by 45 votes.
Yeah, I'm really annoyed about that.
Well, Kate Hoey winning in Vauxhall. I mean, a lot of the things that Labour supporters were saying to me, we're going to get annihilated, but I won't mind if, and then saying if Kate Hoey loses, or if Zach Goldsmith loses, or if, one or two individual things happen, then I'll be able to live with the national annihilation if there are some personal victories. I thought that was quite petty, personally. But it's actually gone the other way, so that people who were saying things like that will instead be going, well, because of the overall result, I don't really care that some of my personal bête noirs have got back in again.
Exactly, and the thing is as well, in London, you've got the like grown majorities and everything, but you've also got us winning Battersea and Wandsworth, and then you've got like us winning Bedford as well, out of nowhere. Just in the home county.
Canterbury's the big one, isn't it? So do you know what? You're 10 times more honest than any politician or political journalist, because you phone me up. No, you are, because you phone me up to tell me you don't really know what's happened or why.
No.
So you need to fix that if you want to get ahead in politics, Jamie.
The only thing you can really say is a true indicator is the 72% youth turnout. Because that's...
Well, I haven't been able to source that number, and this isn't a criticism of you, because it's been around the world, an III, but I haven't been able to source that number, that 72. I've seen it all over social media, but I don't know where it's come from.
I mean, I saw it on David Lammy's Facebook.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's ex cathedra or indeed infallible. I think it's got out there, and it will probably turn out to be close to the truth. And if it isn't, then youth turnout will still turn out to be unexpectedly high. But I had to, because my wife's filing for foreign TV this morning, and when we were comparing notes earlier, she said, "Have you found that 72%? Has it come from anywhere?" And I said, "As far as I can tell, it's just social media. It's not sourced in any way." But youth have played a huge part indeed. You kind of sum it up, Jamie, again by saying I couldn't go out on the doorstep. I had my exams to do. And when you say you don't know what's happened, I think you're part of what has happened. Whether they turn out to be disappointed and or deluded, a huge swathe of the country has looked at Jeremy Corbyn, and quite against the odds and against all the advice of the newspaper editors and the usual suspects, they've looked at him and thought, well, why shouldn't things be significantly different from how they've been for the last 30 years? Why shouldn't we do things differently? It may turn out to be a terrible mistake, but that's what's happened, and it's not confined to young people. I'm getting told off probably more today by older Jeremy Corbyn supporters than any other section of society, and a lot of you are telling me this is the Labour Party you've always supported. It just hasn't existed until Jeremy Corbyn came along. That's something we can explore a little further as well. Jamie, best of luck with those exams. Rob's in Sutton. Rob, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, first of all, Scotland. Your caller just before the break sort of answered the question, but yeah, what the hell, Scotland?
Sounds like a bumper sticker.
Yeah, Ed Miliband's Labour were effectively the Diet Conservatives, so I can sort of forgive them for 2 years ago turning to SNP. And Scotland are generally more left-wing than England, and
it's a Labour territory, Scotland, and it remains Labour even though the SNP are in charge. And I don't mean anything controversial by that. I just mean that the SNP's history and raison d'etre is all about independence rather than policy. Because if you're looking at policy, they're closer to Jeremy Corbyn's Labour than they are to significant swathes of the Parliamentary Labour Party, actually, it has to be said.
Exactly. Yeah. And, we finally got a proper Labour leader giving a proper Labour manifesto, and they all voted Conservative. I mean, I'm quite angry, to be honest.
Because of Scottish Labour being perceived very much as a Blairite institution and very much as distinct from Corbyn's Labour. I mean, this is incredibly, it's all a bit Judean People's Front of Judea splitters, but I think, and my callers from Scotland today have endorsed this view, or at least informed this view, actually. I've got it from them. It's because Kezia Dugdale and the Labour Scotland, Scottish Labour, has not been seen as part of the Jeremy Corbyn project.
No. Yeah, I'm quite disappointed by them. Very disappointed, because if those Conservative Scottish constituencies had voted Labour, then at this moment in time, Jeremy would probably be at Buckingham Palace saying, "Mom, I can form a government."
Well, yeah, that might not be a prospect that fills everybody with the joy that it clearly fills you with, but I think in terms of simple numbers, yeah, you're on the money. If Labour hadn't hemorrhaged Scotland last time round and had managed to hang on to a semblance of strong second place or even first place, then Jeremy Corbyn would currently be Prime Minister, at which point we're all supposed to be absolutely terrified because it'll be a coalition of chaos and he's a terrorist sympathiser. Theresa May is in 45 minutes' time, and you cannot stress this enough. In 45 minutes' time, she is on the way to the to Buckingham Palace to ask the Queen, or to tell the Queen that she thinks she can form a government with an understanding struck with the Democratic Unionist Party. The Democratic Unionist Party has been politically and publicly endorsed by the Loyalist Community Council. The Loyalist Community Council is an amalgam of the Ulster Defence Association, the Ulster Volunteer Force, and the Red Hand Commando. So, this is the challenge for anybody who has, like me, been distracted and concerned by the IRA Corbyn axis. If, unlike me, you have been fully persuaded that it rendered him unfit for office, you need to explain why a party that is actively endorsed by the Red Hand Commando has a place in British government, but Jeremy Corbyn does not. And if you can't explain that, then frankly, as a presenter or a pundit or a politician or a commentator or a columnist who has contributed to the Corbyn terrorist narrative, frankly, you should resign. You should go home. Because if you can't explain why it is absolutely anathema, unacceptable, and utterly beyond the pale for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, given his past associations with Republican terrorists. Let's call a spade a spade. If you have a problem with that and you don't have a problem with Theresa May going to the palace with 10 MPs personally endorsed by the Ulster Volunteer Force in her back pocket, if you can't explain your way out of that, you should shut up now. You really should. 13 pages in the Daily Mail of how Jeremy Corbyn's past associations rendered him unfit for office. I wonder how many pages there'll be tomorrow describing how Theresa May's current associations impact upon her fitness for the same office. Very nearly, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You are looking at a political scenario, a political landscape that absolutely or next to nobody predicted. That's a great thing about Twitter. A couple of you have been in touch to point out that you did actually predict it. And with Twitter, you can prove it, of course, because you've got the tweet in which you did so. What I don't have is the time to check whether you predicted 100 different things and you've just gone back over your archive to pull out the one that's come true. There's a kind of scattergun approach. These are words that fill every listener with joy. Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor, is on the line with the latest. Theo, what's going on? Are you still all right?
Still all right, James. Still here.
Good
still
man.
Functioning. This morning, Michel Barnier, the chief Brexit negotiator in Brussels, offered some conciliatory remarks for Theresa May, a hand of friendship, an olive branch that he would be prepared to begin negotiations at a time that was convenient to the Prime Minister, but he wanted to finish them within the 2-year slot that is provided by Article 50. Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, has not been so conciliatory. He wants to get started perhaps as early as tomorrow.
All elections are important, not only in so-called big member states, but the one of yesterday was of a particular importance. I do strongly hope that Britain will stay ready to open negotiations. As far as the Commission is concerned, we can open negotiations tomorrow morning at 9:30. So we are waiting for visitors coming from London. I hope that we will not experience a further delay in the conclusion of these negotiations. First, we have to agree on the divorce and exit modalities, and then we have to envisage the architecture of our future relations. I do hope that the result of the elections will have no major impact on the negotiations we are desperately waiting for.
There's no way to describe it, James, but to say that Mr. Juncker is basically trolling us. Begin tomorrow, of course, Theresa May's big pitch.
Hang on a minute, mate. I appreciate Barnier's taken a more conciliatory approach, but we have voted to leave the European Union. Jean-Claude Juncker's responsibility is to people who remain in it. So, I mean, it might feel a little bit like trolling, but in terms of his own position and his power base, what he's doing is sticking up for his constituency. We chose not to be part of it.
I was going to just finish, James, if I may. He's I was going to finish by saying that he's trolling us for his advantage.
Yes.
It's in his advantage. He's piling on the pressure onto Theresa May, knowing full well that she can't. There's no way she can get a negotiating team. She hasn't even reappointed a cabinet yet to get over on the Eurostars to Brussels and to find a common negotiating position. Theresa May, of course, boasted is the right word, during this election campaign that she was the one who was going to be ready to go into, to restart negotiations in 11 days after the general election, and Jeremy Corbyn wasn't going to be able to do it. But they can't even bring together a common position. I was speaking to somebody at Conservative Party headquarters very early this morning who was saying, well, we now need a softer Brexit. We should safeguard the rights of EU nationals. Clearly, the British public didn't like what we had to offer when it came to the hard line that we were taking. In terms of the Tory party mechanics, we're now seeing, for want of a better expression, we're now seeing Tory MPs name their price for supporting Theresa May. They want two scalps. Fiona Hill, who was basically Theresa May's enforcer.
It doesn't mean much outside the bubble, does it, though?
Well, it does mean something. I tell you what it speaks to. Fiona Hill was Theresa May's enforcer. Nick Timothy was her voice, her speechwriter. Theresa May is a bureaucrat politician. She's a technocrat politician. She's managerial. She's never had a vision. Everything that, when you hear her speeches, often quite, emotive speeches, it's always been the voice of this man, a bearded man, known as Rasputin, a Rasputin-type character called Mr. Nick Timothy, who was basically Theresa May's vision. And the reason that this is important, that Tory MPs, are after their scalps, is because if you take those two characters away, what are you left with? Theresa May is going to be so weakened without those two people who she relied on. And she relied on them to such an extent, and I know this, that when the terror attack struck in Manchester and London Bridge, and she needed to go back into Downing Street, both of them had to suspend their roles on the campaign, on the Tory campaign, so that they were able to follow her back into, top intelligence briefings, Cobra meetings.
And these are roles you'd normally expect cabinet ministers to be filling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, Theresa May runs this coterie, has this small cabal of advisors, and the criticism was, especially around the dementia tax, was she never tested that policy with backbench MPs to seek a little bit of advice. What do you think your constituents would think of this? There was never that sort of back and forth. It was the Ben Gummer who wrote the manifesto, who of course lost one of 8 ministers who lost their seat up in Ipswich, and Nick Timothy, who basically wrote it as well. And if you take away and I appreciate many of your listeners won't have heard of those two characters, but if you take them out of the equation, what is left at a time when Theresa May has a majority with the DUP of 9?
Yes.
She's going to be lamed up.
Well, we shall see. Two brief questions. Where's Philip Hammond?
Well, he met the Prime Minister this morning and was part of a consensus that she should stay on.
He's stronger now, right? Because everyone was expecting him to be straight out the door. He's much stronger. So his position is strengthened. And the second thing is, what's happening in Kensington?
They've been sent home for, the tellers, I should say, have been sent home to have a rest. And counting, I think, is either going to resume this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And it's looking like it's going to go to Labour.
Say that again.
Kensington is looking like it's going to Labour. Do you know the gag?
No, I heard you do it with Ferrari earlier, but I think you've had time to work on it now a bit. So do it again, and this time make it sing.
The gag is...
No, do it like it's your own gag, Theo. Don't come on.
Okay. The joke is that Tories can no longer afford to live in Kensington and Russians don't vote, and there are, of course, quite deprived areas of Kensington, and many Labour voters turned out to vote, and that's why we're now in a situation...
quite incredible. The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, you think is going to swing to Labour?
Yeah. It's incredible, incredible.
It is incredible, but emblematic, perhaps, of the whole evening. When are you going to clock off?
Well, I'm going to wait for this statement and try and bring you the latest, either in your show, James, or with Sheila.
Great stuff. Theo Usherwood, who has not slept. It's 11:57. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A couple of calls, probably just one, actually, before... Oh, Belfast. We've got to go to Belfast. Joel's in Belfast. Joel, what's going on?
James, thanks for taking the call. Huge fan.
Oh, good man.
Huge fan.
Thank
One
you.
of these boys that listens on the road all day. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise, I appreciate that.
That's it. No, listen, I'm a bit gutted. I have to phone you to disagree. You made a wee comment about the DUP. I was a bit of a broad strokes approach, unfortunately.
Well, you're going to remind me that they rejected the endorsement from the terrorist organisations that I described.
Yeah.
No, that's fair enough, because I made it clear on Twitter that you don't get to choose who endorses you or who doesn't. But if you're getting endorsed by the Red Hand Commando, even if you reject that endorsement, I think we have to ask, what is it about them that the Red Hand Commando like?
It's not what they like about the DUP, because the DUP are a vile, horrible party, and they don't serve the interests of the people that they claim to represent. The problem is that Northern Ireland's in a vacuum with no progressive left-wing working-class alternatives, and Labour won't stand here. The SDLP who sit with Labour in Westminster are...
They just got wiped out.
And they're constitutionally based, so a working-class unionist Protestant...
But they've got no seats. They lost all three of their seats, I think, last night, didn't they, the SDLP?
Yeah.
That's Jerry Fitt's old party.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the context of Northern Ireland is we're really struggling, and Brexit's going to hurt us, and look who we're being represented by. That's our voice. That's the top table.
Lordy. So you're saying if you think you've got it bad in England, spare a thought for us over in Northern Ireland.
Boy, what's happening over here? It's I'm actually, to tell you the truth of how bad it is, I'm immigrating on Monday.
Where are you?
I'm moving to Australia on Monday.
You're moving to Australia on Monday?
Yeah, that's it.
How much of that is Brexit based, and how much of that is Belfast based?
About 90% of that's Brexit based. If Brexit had went the other way, I probably would have stayed. To be honest, we're not looking like we've got a great future. I'm hoping to be proved wrong.
So am I. I'm hoping you'll move back as soon as we secure this glorious, wonderful deal that Theresa May was supposed to spend the entire election campaign selling to us and explaining to us what it contained. I wish you well. I really do. You can still listen to me in Australia, just to get priorities straight, Joel, and to focus on the important things. You can still listen in Australia online, but it might interfere with your sleep patterns.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to pay for your podcast now, James.
Finally, a winner. There you Grant. Thank you, Joel. I appreciate all of that. It's coming up to 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A lot of you suggesting that Theo and I should host a show together. Well, do you know what? Stranger things have happened. Liberal Democrats leader Tim Farron is delivering his post-match analysis. He's sort of halfway through it, but we'll dip in and see what's going on.
We are not yet at the point where our party fully reflects the diversity of our great country, but we have made real progress. But while we have made great gains, we have also lost colleagues who will be very sorely missed. Nick Clegg is a giant of British politics, a friend and a hero to me and countless others. Not only did he lead our party into government for the first time in generations, he did so in the most difficult of circumstances and for the most noble of reasons. Our party paid a political price for joining that coalition government, but it is nothing compared to the price our country would have paid had Nick not shown the steel and determination to do the right thing when it was needed most. In 2010, our country was on the edge of a precipice. Because of Nick Clegg, it survived and it flourished. The pupil premium, which has helped so many children get the start in life they deserve, would not have happened without Nick Clegg. Same-sex marriage would not have happened without Nick Clegg. The children of asylum seekers would have remained behind bars without Nick Clegg. The raising of the income tax threshold, which has helped millions of people on low and middle incomes, would not have happened without Nick Clegg. I could stand here and keep listening, or keep listing Nick's achievements, but it would take hours. People say they want politicians to put their differences aside and to put the country first. Nick Clegg did that. Have no doubt, history will be kind to Nick, and the new Parliament will be immensely poorer without the insight, expertise and passion he brings, especially to the Brexit debate. We also say goodbye to Greg Mulholland, Mark Williams and Sarah Olney. Greg has been a brilliant, dedicated and determined campaigner and a loyal servant to the people of Leeds North West. Mark, a powerful voice for Wales, for Ceredigion and for rural communities everywhere. And Sarah, in her few short months in Parliament, showed that she had the makings of a brilliant MP. She was a brilliant MP and a real star of the party's future. Our Parliament is worse off without them, and I am certain that if they want to, Greg, Mark and Sarah can return to our ranks in the future. Theresa May called this election expecting it to be a coronation. She took each and every one of us for granted in the most cynical way possible. Like David Cameron before her, our Conservative Prime Minister rolled the dice and put the future of our country at risk out of sheer arrogance and vanity. And now, in her diminished state, she reaches out to the right to form her own coalition of chaos. Theresa May has done the opposite of what Nick Clegg did. She put her party before her country. She has been found out. She should be ashamed.
We will now have after 12 is the time. I think should we listen to a little bit more of Tim Farron? I'm just sort of intrigued to know whether he's not going to resign, is he? Oh, go on, let's leave it on for a bit longer.
History. Theresa May promised strong and stable leadership. She has brought weakness and uncertainty. If she has an ounce of self-respect, she will resign. The Tories have taken our country for granted too many times. Whatever happens in this coming Parliament, the Liberal Democrats will fight for you, for your family and for your community. And if Theresa May or any other Conservative approaches the Liberal Democrats and asks for our support to deliver their agenda, let me make our position clear. No deal is better than a bad deal. There will be...
8 minutes after 12 is the time. I don't think Tim Farron's going anywhere, but I'll keep a close eye on that for you just in case he is. Obviously, when I say at 10 o'clock in the morning that I'm a lot more interested in what my callers have to say than any of the major players. I did it with the caveat that the big beasts of British politics will be welcome on the programme. Tim Farron, I suppose, just about fits into that description. 9 minutes after 12 is the time. That Nick Clegg thing, when we sort of get stuck into slightly more nuanced post-mortem next week, Nick Clegg has been... a very interesting figure in British politics, and one who will leave a very complicated legacy. A very complicated legacy. Tuition fees, or his failure to dispatch in debate the sort of key Brexiters, which he stepped up to the plate to do that and did not succeed in debating against Nigel Farage and losing. I think most people felt, I'm not the only person on the planet who knows how easy it is to dismantle that man, but Nick Clegg apparently wasn't up to the job. So there are, curious contents to his legacy, and yet I think Farron probably will have touched a nerve, even among people who can't forgive him for going into coalition, or can't forgive him for abandoning tuition fees, or can't forgive him for not marshalling the forces more effectively during Brexit. I think he's a decent man, Clegg. It's the thing for me is integrity, honesty, people who kind of, I don't know, little things like not cheating on their wives or telling lies to their employers. All these things that I thought as a kid would be obstacles to advancement in British politics don't seem to have any effect at all upon the careers of some British politicians. Nick Clegg was a good man, a good dad, good politician. He still is a good dad and a good man, but he's not a politician anymore. James is in Hampstead. Do you know... Oh, no. All right, I got confused. James, what would you like to say?
I just would like to say that basically I'm really disappointed with Theresa May.
Why, what's she done?
She just basically had a very weak campaign. She let her party down. She's gone on this hard stance of Brexit from day one. And I just think that she's been bashed to pieces by the electorate.
Well, how much responsibility lies at her own feet?
I think there's got to be a considerable amount.
It's got to be all of it, hasn't it? I mean, she couldn't have had an easier ride from the press. She rolled out the red carpet on the Daily Mail, front pages about how finally we've got a politician, we've got a Prime Minister we can trust. No mention at all of the U-turn on dementia tax on the next day's front page. I can't imagine a leader having it easier.
No, she and even the Sun gave it to her the day before the election. I mean, it was just frightening how she seems to have failed miserably. She took a serious kind of punt by calling this election and has let everybody down, in my opinion. I think
what happens next? You're a Conservative, are you?
Yeah.
So you feel personally let down?
I do feel let down, and there is a man that won 2 elections on his own. We know who I'm talking about, to run London.
Oh, yes, London, which just resoundingly endorsed Jeremy Corbyn on a scale which absolutely nobody expected.
Yes.
Well, you can help me out then, because you just heard me talking about integrity and how sad I find it that British politics doesn't seem to offer up any obstacles to people who routinely cheat on their wives. And in the case of Boris, of course, he's got a love child running around Chelsea. He's got a long and proud history of lying to all of his employers, his party leaders and voters. But you still think the British public would fall for that?
I just think that I thought he did an extremely good job of running London. I mean, people may disagree.
You use the cable car a lot, do you, James?
Absolutely. the Boris bikes are a good idea and have been
Ken's idea.
Around the world.
Ken's idea.
Okay. I just feel let down in general by the whole situation.
I love you, mate. I like the fact we've had a bit of a toing and a throwing there, but we're both chuckling, right?
Yeah, no, we're having a laugh.
That's what I want politics to go back to. We can disagree with each other, in this case about Boris Johnson, and I can think you're profoundly wrong, and you can think I'm ridiculously wrong, but we can chuckle together and then move on. And I don't know, it just feels to me as if most of British politics now would have us spitting at each other. And let me just have a look at Twitter to give you an example of what I mean. I can't even use that word. I've got the C word at the top of my inbox. This is from someone who, needless to say, doesn't put their name on their tweets. The DUP are democratically elected. James, you bitter bleep. I want to move away from that now.
I just think it's all got very foul-tasted, and it needs to get back to some real. There needs to be some real characters that are kind of.
Well, yeah. Now you're back on the Boris bus, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
We shall see. Ring me again.
I'll quit while I'm behind.
Quit while you're behind. Get back on your bike. The question of whether or not Boris still does retain that curious position in the hearts and minds of the British public is one which we will almost certainly address next week, James. So book your seat now for that phone. And oddly, for the very first time since 10 o'clock this morning, I have one phone line free on my switchboard. So, there it goes. But and when I bid farewell to James, there'll be another one. So just keep hitting redial 0345 6060 973. Ralph is in Canterbury. A very interesting result there. Ralph, what's on your mind? What do you want to say?
Yeah, hi. What's on my mind is, there seems to be some sort of shock that Jeremy Corbyn reached out to the youth and the youth came running to his call. Nothing to do with the fact that he was going to wipe away university fees and about £27,000 worth of debt.
Ooh, crikey, you're joking, aren't you? Who said it had nothing to do with that? I'd have thought that was a very big factor.
It's a bribe, isn't it? It's a bribe. I mean, in Canterbury, which is a university town, 30,000 plus students here, they were queuing up to vote yesterday just to get rid of their debt.
Well, damn, so they must be mad.
Is that not a bribe?
I think you'll find it's called a policy. I mean, what would the triple lock pension be if you're going to use the word bribe?
The triple lock is exactly the same thing. It is a bribe. Right. I'm not saying that Conservatives are any better than Labour.
So what would a tax cut for any
running to Labour?
What would a tax cut for anyone be if not a bribe?
A tax cut. Politics is about bribes. But
so why are you so upset? Why are you so upset with people who want to get a university education rather than rich people who want to hang on to as much of their money as possible?
I'm upset because it's being portrayed that they ran to Corbyn for all of his policies, not only the fact. And I deal with a lot of university students.
Well, you clearly do, and it may be slightly colouring your perspective, because, I mean, even the most cursory glance at the numbers, Ralph, would assure you, I mean, if you were minded to be reassured, that people at university are not responsible for the scale of the swing to Jeremy Corbyn. Not by any stretch of the imagination.
Is that a fact?
Well, the percentage of young people that go to university isn't high enough to deliver the scale of the swing that you describe. And of course, lots of people that go to university might hate Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, no, I guess that's true. But
so, country of 60 million. Country of 60 million. No, I know you're in Canterbury, and I understand that you're cross.
After 160 years of conservatism.
Yeah.
By the way, you know, Julian Brazier deserved to go because he was an ineffective MP.
Well, you're a right bundle of laughs, aren't you? Everything's a bribe. The bloke who's been chucked out deserved to get chucked out. The bloke who's got in didn't deserve to get in. And people who want a free education are the scum of the earth.
I didn't say it was scum of the earth.
No, you didn't. I was just.
I mean, I think you're putting words in.
I was just tabloidising. I was tabloidising
there. Yeah, of course. I forgot you're on the right wing side of the media. Listen, he did deserve to go, but I am a bit. I feel that people are being naive.
So for your benefit, you wanted included. I reject completely the idea that every young person who's been drawn to Jeremy Corbyn has done so for personal financial benefit. But you're absolutely right. We should remind listeners of the existence of the ones who did perhaps cast their vote according to that promise, dangled in front of them that they'd get free university education. But of course they're not going to, because he lost.
Well, maybe. We'll see. Only time.
No, he did lose. I mean, the Conservatives are the biggest party, but he won in Canterbury, and that's why, if you'd allow me, I hope I'm not putting words into your mouth, you're having something of a psychodrama this morning, Ralph.
I'm certainly having a meltdown. I'm ringing you from Brazil now.
It's 12:17. I think we started asking what the biggest thing you're taking away from yesterday's result is, and that question remains in front of us. But understandably, everything's gone sort of down unpredictable and predictable paths. You are welcome on this programme to ring in and talk about whatever you want. And you can continue to do so right up until 1 o'clock when Sheila Fogarty... Is Sheila doing another shift? Goodness grief. Getting the Theo Usherwood Award for devotion to duty today, Sheila Fogarty, but she'll be with you at 1 o'clock live from Parliament Green. I'll give you the phone line if I've got any phone lines free, but we'll wait and see. Matthew's in High Wycombe. Matthew, what would you like to say?
Well, James, first of all, congratulations on excellent comment and debate every day.
Oh, you're very kind. It's not necessary. Thank you, mate. I appreciate that.
No, well, first of all, I don't know if any other callers picked up on this, but from what I'm reading, it's a record number of MPs that are female. I think that can only be a good thing.
Yes.
In a world where at least 50% of the electorate is female, I think too often, even the enlightened males amongst us, we tend to dominate the conversation. The second thing I'd like to say is just really it exposes some of the weaknesses in the UK system. And don't get me wrong, it's an incredible system. But if you look at the MP numbers, the DUP's got the whip hand. This is a far-right party, really. If you look at the actual gross numbers of people voting, I guess you could say that the electorate is broadly left-wing, or at least the people who showed up to vote are broadly left-wing, and yet the result's not going to go their way. So there probably needs to be some constitutional reform. It's a pity Nick Clegg really screwed it up when he had the chance.
Well, he didn't really screw it up. He secured a vote on it, and the vote got lost.
I hear you, but he should have seen that was a trap from the Tory side of things.
Oh, 2020 hindsight's a wonderful thing. Matthew, I feel like, can we just for one day, and one day only, can we all give Clegg a cuddle? He lost his seat, you know, he didn't have to. He could have gone off and made money. He could have done what the rest of them do from that coalition. He could probably be editing the London Evening Standard if he's thrown his hat into the ring, but he didn't. He stayed to represent the people of Sheffield Hallam and to make a case for evidence-based attitudes towards leaving the European Union rather than emotion-based. And he didn't have to do that. But you're right. That's why I said his legacy, I spent ages coming up with the right word for this. His legacy is complicated, Matthew.
Sure. Fair enough. I mean, he's not a liar like Boris Johnson.
No, exactly. Or a serial adulterer. Although actually, I don't have any proof of that in Nick Clegg's case. I just look at the fellow and I like the cut of his jib. But no, and the democratic flaws that you describe become even more stark when you look at the number of people, the number of individual voters that deliver those 10 seats to the DUP. And the DUP, again, these are the things that this is what worries me. Is that I know, because of the job that I do and the number of people on Twitter who send me useful stuff, I know within minutes of that being announced, I'm reminded, because I wouldn't have got it from the top of my head, that the DUP were opposed to the Good Friday Agreement.
Correct.
In Northern Ireland.
Stats I was reading, not the DUP, but the paramilitaries that you were talking about supporting them.
The UVF, the Red Hand Commando.
Yeah, all of those boys. They're responsible for about 30%, and this is what I've told of Wikipedia, so it might be all right, yeah? But 30% of the total deaths, 48% of the total civilian deaths. So they're at least almost on par with the IRA for actually killing people who are not directly involved in the Troubles. But because those people, I'm guessing, were either affiliated to the IRA or maybe Catholic or not in the mainland UK, and they weren't bombing mainland Britain, then it's terrorism that doesn't bother us. And, I mean, you might hear from my accent, I'm from South Africa, so the ANC, which has got its own problems now, used terrorism as a method against an evil regime like apartheid, and it was sort of seen as maybe okay, but the apartheid regime always used to use the terrorism stick to beat him. So people confuse, and Islamic terrorism is awful, but terrorism is the method. What's evil is the ideology. So in the case of maybe apartheid, other people would argue ANC was doing the right thing, awful though the consequences were. Clearly, a global caliphate is an awful idea. Even most Muslims would say it's an awful idea.
Well, for sure.
But that...
It's nuanced as well. That's the word you're reaching for. It's usually, I mean, it doesn't feel nuanced when you're reeling from a terror attack upon your hometown like we are at the moment, but it is a little bit more nuanced than binary analyses allow. And the proof of that particular pudding is not in the bleatings of liberals like me or you. The proof of the pudding of how nuanced it is that you now have a Prime Minister going to the palace with 10 MPs endorsed by terror organisations in her back pocket after a campaign in which the biggest stick with which they could beat her opponent was his supposed associations with former terrorists who have repented of their ways and signed up to the Good Friday Agreement that the DUP actively rejected. If that's not nuanced, I don't know what is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at it this way. I mean, the politicians who support Islamic terrorism or are supported by Islamic terrorists and hate gays or whatever, okay, they're a different flavour of awful, but they're no more awful than these loonies in the DUP who, if used to be believed, think that dinosaur bones were put there by God. It's the same kind of
that's a value judgment. At the moment, at this point in my life and this point in Western history, I've got a much bigger problem with the Islamist terrorism than I do with the loyalist terrorism. But that's the point, isn't it? It's about how close it is, how near it feels, how recent it was. You make some brilliant points, Matthew, and I'm grateful to you. I love the fact that you've been researching. This isn't meant to sound patronising at all. Quite the opposite. I wish everyone was like you. You've been researching it online already to fill in the gaps that you don't know. If everybody did that, then the drunk people shouting fish, while everybody with any expertise or insight whatsoever begins to explain why the Brexit reality is going to be brutal, that odd little dichotomy of British political discourse would not be unfolding in such a grimly predictable fashion. Can I go to Phil in Norwich? I've only got a minute. Phil, are you too brilliant to squeeze into a minute, or shall I come to you first after the news?
I'll let you decide, James. I'm not offended if I have to wait.
Well, you start talking, and if I'm enjoying it, we'll come back after the news. But no pressure, mate.
I'm just going to say that I'm a paid-up Conservative member. And as I went to the polling booth yesterday, I don't think I've ever felt so disenchanted as I have before. I wondered at the time how many other people were feeling exactly the same way, and quite evidently, there were a lot of them.
Well, oddly, yesterday's programme, which I don't think you listened to, was dedicated to a similar feeling that I had, although I'm not a fully paid-up member of any political party. I felt I was going to the polls feeling quite gloriously unrepresented, and come Monday morning, I probably still will again, but I quite like the wake-up call that this election feels like.
Yeah, and that is just it. I think they've I was going to say the Conservative Party, but as a whole, I think the parties have underestimated just how tired the electorate are. You know, we've gone from an election to a referendum to another election. we've made 3 very big decisions in the space of.
We didn't make a decision yesterday. That might prove to be the problem that predicts what you're dreading.
Yeah. Well, I can take it or leave it. It's a marvellous democracy that we live in, and essentially the electorate get the government that they want, and this is the decision that we've come to. We're not happy with the status quo. So something has to change.
Something has to give, and it'll be interesting to see what it is. At this point, I don't see a hardening of far-right politics being the next chapter, but who knows? The DUP are effectively in the backseat of Theresa May's car as she makes her way, as we speak, towards Buckingham Palace. I haven't done anything on why you voted the way you voted. All we've done is post-mortem, but we did quite a lot in the run-up on why you were going to vote in the way that you were going to vote. Next week will be fun. I have this slight tendency, Caroline and I will sort of take it on its merits. I have a slight tendency to lean towards doing too much political analysis, but I think that's better than doing too little. So next week will be fun. We've got 15 hours, 14 if you knock off Mystery Hour together next week. How many of them do you think will be dedicated to well, it won't be post-electional analysis will it? It will also be analysis of the ongoing situation. For example, that brilliant caller Matthew, the South African fella, describing the origins and similarities of terrorism, I probably should have given him a little longer on air, because the more you think about it, the more the DUP do deserve the label religious fundamentalists. So, I mean, not only have you got that post-Manchester and London hangover for Theresa May, and that she didn't appear to provide strong and stable leadership on the security front, when you couple that with the toxic attempt to portray Jeremy Corbyn as somehow being soft on terrorism or being a friend of terrorists, you now have her effectively inviting into government a party that is made up of religious fundamentalists, creationists, people who believe that the earth is 4,000 years old and that dinosaur bones were buried by God to test our faith. People who are going to have huge problems with things like equal marriage, and people who actually, this is on the record, voted against the Good Friday Agreement. So Jeremy Corbyn is rendered utterly beyond the pale by his associations with people who contributed to the peace process. Theresa May is now going to the palace with a, quote, understanding with the only party in Northern Ireland, I think the only party in Northern Ireland, I could be wrong, that actively voted against the result of the peace process. And you sometimes wonder why I get my knickers in such a twist about how mad we've allowed things to become. That surely is one of the finest illustrations of possible. Jeremy Corbyn, according to much of the media in this country, is utterly beyond the pale because of his associations with Republicans, former terrorists turned politicians who contributed to and signed up for the Good Friday Agreement. I don't personally buy the argument that his association with them somehow accelerated the Good Friday Agreement, but it's out there, and it's a valid argument worthy of examination, put up by his friends and defenders. Personally, I don't see it. But I do see Theresa May driving to Buckingham Palace with an understanding struck between her and a party that actually rejected the result of the peace process. So if you care one jot about honesty, consistency and truth, you owe it to yourself and your children to start asking these people who banged on about Corbyn to explain precisely why it's okay to get into bed with people that rejected the Good Friday Agreement. Actually reject 71-point-something% of voters in Northern Ireland voted for it. The DUP voted against it. And that's who she's in bed with. What will Paul Dacre have to say about that tomorrow morning, I wonder? Given that on Wednesday morning, or yesterday morning, it was a troika of, what was the phrase used? Terrorist apologists. Sinn Féin have 7 seats in the House of Commons. 7 seats that if he wanted to, or if he really was this sort of great sympathiser, those 7 seats, you'd expect Sinn Féin to be announcing that they'll throw their lot in with Jeremy Corbyn, no? Wouldn't you? No, they're not doing that. They're not coming to Westminster. They don't recognise it because they continue to exist to campaign for a united Ireland. So the so-called terrorists with whom Jeremy Corbyn sympathised are not offering him their support in Westminster, but the organisation endorsed by the Red Hand Commando and the Ulster Volunteer Force, which actually and actively voted against the peace agreement in Northern Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement, yeah, they are throwing their lot in at Westminster. But they're throwing their lot in with the same woman that the bloke who portrayed Corbyn, Abbott and McDonnell as terrorist sympathisers called a Prime Minister that this country can finally trust. So no, I'm not obsessed. I'm just lonely. John's in Leeds. John, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello,
Thanks
John.
for having me on.
Very
I just
well.
want to say I downloaded the app about a month ago, and if it wasn't for you, I would have deleted it by now, so thank you very much.
That's a compliment of sorts. Thank you, John. You do not have to say nice things to me before contributing, but it's always nice when you do. John, carry on.
Okay. Right, so about 2 years ago, I heard about this guy, Jeremy Corbyn. I'm a young guy, and I went to see him talk, and I really liked him. And even then, there was a groundswell of, like, young people there. It was really weird. So I got my supporter fee last year and paid for him again to get the leadership. And at the same time as this, I decided, after working full-time since the age of 16, that I was going to apply to be a nurse.
Yes.
And this was after the government had announced the bursary was going.
Right. So just to explain to people who don't understand, previously your nurse training would have been free. It would have been paid for by the government, but the current government introduced a policy whereby you'll have to take out a loan in order to study to be a nurse, and then pay it back when you start earning as a nurse in a sector which currently has a pay freeze of 1% in place, despite inflation now being higher than that.
Exactly, and because I wanted to do the job so much, I wasn't bothered by that. So I went and applied anyway. So the last guy who rang in, who said that we were all young people were just going for the student fee, I completely disregard that.
Ralph, by his own admission, he was having a bit of a meltdown, old Ralph in Canterbury.
Yeah. Well, I just feel sorry for young people, really, who have been supporting Jeremy for 2 years. And then, obviously, 4 weeks before, we suddenly get told why we're supporting him.
Oh, I see what you mean. So the tuition fees promise came when the manifesto was published, and the groundswell of particularly youthful support for him was well established long before the manifesto was. It's a great point.
I believe so, because my local constituency, are we allowed to mention constituency?
Yeah, so you can do what you want now. It's all over.
Okay, so Alex Sobel got in Leeds North West, taking off the Lib Dems. And in 2015, he was only a couple of hundred behind Greg Mulholland. And this time he absolutely decimated him. So I think that sort of movement of voting and young people has been going on since 2015. I don't think it's just, free tuition fees.
No, of course it isn't. And I mean, Scott got cross with me. He said a year ago you'd have torn that bloke to shreds, talking about the fella you're referring to. But I preferred parting with a bit of a giggle and a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
But his point wasn't fair. The suggestion that it would have influenced some votes, of course it would. But the people who've been turning up to Corbyn's rallies and cheering him up and down the country for the last 2 years from your generation were not doing so because they thought they were going to get a freebie on their education. But sometimes, choose my words carefully here, sometimes I think the problem with politics is that none of us can believe that the other lot aren't like us. So people on one side, he, for example, believes that vote must have been cast out of personal greed, because presumably, and he's not here to defend himself, presumably, because when I pointed out to him that every policy effectively is a bribe, he probably thought that's how everybody else behaves. They're going to vote in the way that makes them best off. But people like you, particularly if you're training to be a nurse, you take other things into account when you're deciding how to cast your vote.
That's it. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the bigger picture, really, when it came to everything. And actually, I think you're right. He was, out of all the callers you've had in, it was nice to hear you both laughing, which I think is a positive thing that's come out of this campaign.
Well, we'll see.
People are talking.
We'll
young
see.
people are talking.
Yeah, that's true. And again, the youth give me hope. But I mean, kind of gentler politics. We might still be a little bit early on that. Fingers crossed.
I don't know.
John, you take care, mate.
James.
And thanks for your kind words. Keep that app on your phone, whatever you do. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. There are some real dopes out there. I do apologise for using that word. Someone called Jamie Hewitt Hunt has said, "My God, James, how biased," which you've spelt wrong, Jamie, but, I wouldn't point that out if you didn't have a double-barrelled name. The nurse course was free as it was a skills gap. That skills gap has closed, hence not free anymore. Have you seen how many nurses from EU countries have quit the NHS since the Brexit result came in? And do you remember how many people during that Brexit campaign told us that one of the reasons why we shouldn't worry about uncontrolled emigration is because we train up our own people to do it? So, skills gap, my fat foot, you fool. Gavin's on the Isle of Wight. Gavin, what's going on?
Hi, James. I feel like I'm always singing off the same hymn sheet as you with this.
Well done. Congratulations on being so right about everything.
Exactly, it's a lovely place to be. I want to go back to before the Brexit referendum, and there seems to be two camps of people. There were those who thought that Brexit, we would do it, it'd be very easy, we vote, and there were those that thought the next day after the referendum that was it, we were out of Europe.
Yeah, bless them.
And then there were the rest of us who said that actually this is a very complex situation, it's an unprecedented process, it's very risky, very disruptive to the country.
Yes.
And look where we are now. We're less than 12 months since the referendum. There's been no positives mentioned recently about leaving the EU. And how great that's
yes,
gonna be
that
for
was
us.
sort of a saboteur, are you? Fish!
Yeah, all those negatives that we all mentioned beforehand, they're all coming to light. So where are all these positives that how great it was going to be? They've all disappeared. Even Theresa May's now saying, well, we'll make the best of a bad situation.
Fish, man! Fish! Are you listening? And blue passports.
That's it, the blue passports will fix it all.
See? Wasn't too difficult, was it?
I can't even. The thing is, I don't even want to say let's go for a second referendum. That's the thing that people, we always get that batted back. Oh, you just want another referendum. There's not even any point of doing that now. We're so far down the route of it that even if 75% of the country said, actually, we made a mistake, let's stay in the EU, we can't do that. We've triggered Article 50.
No, we probably could,
So-
but we'd I mean, it would be a negotiating position.
There would be a negotiating position. So all those special opt-outs that we've previously
No,
had...
I think it's bad.
there's
I
no
don't
way
think
we'd
it's
get-
as bad
there's
as
no way
that.
we'd get those again.
I don't think it's as bad as
we
that.
Get it.
I think we
would
can
be in the
revoke.
EU
All
like
right,
Spain or
just
France.
cheer up, Gavin, will you? I think you can revoke Article 50, but we'd have to move quick, and it would be very hard to get past the sort of chomping rump of the country who are too old or too stupid to understand the
Yeah, I
dangers that
can't
they're
see that
inflicting
happening.
on the rest of us. So it's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
we're a bit stuck.
Yeah,
No.
great. Well, you're a flipping bundle of laughs, aren't you, Gav?
If anything else, I don't think anyone else in the EU is going to be leaving the EU anytime soon. They're going to have seen what's happened over here and gone, we're not doing that.
No, but that's all they've got left. Is they say, so why are we leaving? What's the positive? Because like I'm often asking people to tell me what the positives are, short of, just having some drunk bloke in a corner shouting fish at you every 20 minutes and getting booked by the BBC every 15. But you look for the positives. One of them, as I'm sure you know, Gavin, is that the whole EU project is about to collapse.
Yeah, it's all going to fall over, but it's okay. We've got the rest of the world to trade with.
And don't forget that domino effect that Brexit was supposed to start, that was going to sweep right the way through Europe. And of course, the people that told us that, the fact that they've been proved to be complete charlatans, is not relevant whatsoever to the bigger picture of whether or not they should be trusted.
I think France scuppered that one a little bit, didn't they?
France scuppered that. Wait till you see the Germany presidential result, or the election results in Germany later this year. Theresa May is on her way to the... Well, I say she is. I mean, the car is. But until the car gets there, we won't know who's actually in it. She might send Amber Rudd again. We'll have to wait and see. Sheila Fogarty, however, is primed and ready for action. How many hours will this be? Out the last 24?
Oh gosh, I did yesterday, then I did
3.
last night, and now I'm doing today. That's all I can tell you.
That's 3.
Don't make me do maths,
6
James.
out of 27. So it's like Nick Ferrari and Diane Abbott all over again.
80 million. And the thing I loved about that interview most of all, just digressing, was yeah. So where she said, yeah, that's it, that figure. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, really
35,000 majority she got. Her majority almost as big as Theresa May's total number of votes. These are strange times, Sheila, and we need you to steer us through them.
Well, I will steer you through them. I just noticed that the cars full of people that we think will include the Prime Minister, Theresa May, have returned to Downing Street now, on the screen I'm looking at here. We have said, haven't we, James, in the handover off-air, when we say bye-bye, hello and goodbye in quick succession, Theresa May is on Downing Street now after seeing the Queen. We've said, what do you think? What do you think? Was this scenario on our agenda?
I don't think it was on anybody's except Servation's, actually. I think, is she about to deliver a speech?
She's about to deliver a speech in a very beautiful fitted blue suit.
They're talking about Philip May there. It is very nice, and a sort of reddish tie. Shall we have a listen to it? Sheila Fogarty with you from One, of course.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a government that can provide certainty and lead Britain forward at this critical time for our country. This government will guide the country through the crucial Brexit talks that begin in just 10 days and deliver on the will of the British people by taking the United Kingdom out of the European Union. It will work to keep our nation safe and secure by delivering the change that I set out following the appalling attacks in Manchester and London, cracking down on the ideology of Islamist extremism and all those who support it, and giving the police and the authorities the powers they need to keep our country safe. The government I lead will put fairness and opportunity at the heart of everything we do, so that we will fulfil the promise of Brexit together and, over the next 5 years, build a country in which no one and no community is left behind. A country in which prosperity and opportunity are shared right across this United Kingdom. What the country needs more than ever is certainty. And having secured the largest number of votes and the greatest number of seats in the general election, it is clear that only the Conservative and Unionist Party has the legitimacy and ability to provide that certainty by commanding a majority in the House of Commons. As we do, we will continue to work with our friends and allies in the Democratic Unionist Party in particular. Our two parties have enjoyed a strong relationship over many years, and this gives me the confidence to believe that we will be able to work together in the interests of the whole United Kingdom. This will allow us to come together as a country and channel our energies towards a successful Brexit deal that works for everyone in this country, securing a new partnership with the EU which guarantees our long-term prosperity. That's what people voted for last June. That's what we will deliver. Now let's get to work.
Well, there we are. Theresa May.
I think there's a very real possibility nobody's actually told her the result from last night. Isn't there? That was a speech delivered in almost entire ignorance, or perhaps elective ignorance, of what just happened. Just when you think things can't get any more crazy, they get crazier. That speech didn't even mention. It did not mention the hemorrhaging of support, the loss of seats, the ministers who have essentially been consigned to the dole queue by her decision to throw an election. And she's still talking about Brexit. And she didn't mention, of course, the fact that the party whose vote she's going to rely on to conduct that slim majority actively and definitively opposed the Good Friday Agreement. Oh, man alive. I'll tell you what, it's a very good time for radio talk show hosts. Not such a good time for the soul. Sam's in Slough. Sam, what would you like to say?
So I come from a quite conservative family. They're swing voters, but generally they do lean right on the fiscal stuff.
Yes.
But I think she just went too far with the manifesto. I mean, they lean right, but they're not insane. They're not going to vote completely not in their favour.
Sure.
They want a good education system. They want a secure police force.
And they want a publicly funded NHS. So then there's a lot of concerns that they're not going to have one if we carry on this journey rightwards.
I mean, there's one thing in believing the lies of the right-wing media.
Yes.
And it's another thing to see the cuts that the Tories are making having an effect right in front of your eyes. Let's take the incidents in London and Manchester.
Yes.
People are attributing directly to the cuts made by Theresa May, and people are saying, well, okay, yeah, I may be conservative, but I can see how this isn't in my favour anymore.
And you remind me of something. There's a word we haven't mentioned today, somewhat remarkably, and it was more or less absent from the election debates as well, and the whole campaigning, and that is the word that has defined almost all of British politics for the last 10 years. The word is immigration. So what they couldn't do was portray what you've just described as somehow being the fault of immigration. They couldn't carry on. I mean, some people will carry on punting these lies, but the idea that parts of the country that have not getting proper GP access and don't have any immigrants in them at all, that's somehow the fault of immigration. That's the problem, perhaps, is that the people didn't swallow the pill that they've swallowed in all other votes. When anything that's gone wrong, they've been told it's all because of immigration.
I think that's exactly it. They lost the scapegoat on their... they were so proud of their cuts.
Yeah.
They're so proud of their cuts. They flashed them all over the place. We've done this, we've done that. Judge us on our record. Well, your record is not working out so well.
What would bring your family back on side? Just a combination of fiscal conservatism and a degree of, I suppose, liberal social policy. That's what she was supposed to provide, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's centre-right, not hard-right.
Centre-right, not hard-right. Centre-right and centre-left still gloriously unrepresented, but I suspect the centre-left is going to start dancing towards Jeremy Corbyn with rather more enthusiasm than the centre-right are likely to dance towards Theresa May. And if Sam's family experiences anything to go by, then the centre ground is up for grabs. Even the centre-right is up for grabs. This is where the Trident example will become absolutely crucial, and this is why, at risk of blowing my own trumpet even more violently than usual, this is why you need to find somebody somewhere in the media that examines these issues in a little more detail than the kind of two-dimensional binary, oh, he'll expose us to nuclear war. Jeremy Corbyn would like to get rid of Trident, but his party voted against it. And for all his flaws, his myriad failings, his devotion to that sort of democracy is absolutely complete. So he is a leader who will be able to lead a party in a direction that he personally wouldn't have chosen to go, but as a respecter of democracy finds himself compelled to go. So even that's not that confusing anymore. Personally, I still have big problems with some of the IRA legacy, and I have huge problems with some of the DUP legacy, but that's what's called being honest and consistent. I've got problems with both of those associations. You can't have a problem with one and not with the other. But I leave you with the very real possibility, having listened to the Prime Minister's words on the steps of 10 Downing Street, that nobody's told of the result yet.